I live in northern Michigan, so I am used to it snowing a good amount throughout the winter season. A few years ago, we got hammered pretty hard, and one time the only option was to be snowed in, which I was fine with. Before the big snowstorm, I bought all the snacks I would need for the next couple of days and prepared to watch all the shows I needed to catch up on. It was around 11:45 on a Wednesday night, and the snow had already been falling for hours by that time. When I looked out the window, maybe an hour and a half earlier, it was at least 10 inches on the ground. A winter wonderland, to say the least. I was getting sleepy and decided to turn in for the night. I cut off the TV in the living room and made my way to my bedroom to lay down. I was pretty sleepy, so within minutes I had fallen asleep. After what only felt like a few minutes of sleep, I was awoken by a loud bang from downstairs. I popped up super alert, with my heart rate through the roof. I'm a big guy, and not to toot my own horn, but pretty tough, so after initially being startled, I immediately went into offensive mode and rushed downstairs to see what was going on. I live alone, so it was up to me anyway. I hurried downstairs to find my side door open, with snow and the winter air blowing into my house. I just stood there confused on how this could have happened. I was pretty sure I remembered locking the door. I grabbed the doorknob and slowly pushed the door shut. I wasn't even focused on closing it, but instead still bewildered on how it could have happened. I figured that I must not have locked the door or shut it all the way, making it possible for a strong wind to blow it open. When I initially ran downstairs, I was barefoot, so as I walked back down the hall towards the stairs to go back up to bed, I stepped in a puddle of ice-cold water and slush. I moved my foot quickly, shocked from the cold and confused to why the floor in my hallway was wet. I cut on the hall light to see snowy boot tracks down the hall and up the stairs. I felt as though I was in a nightmare. I remember standing there literally paralyzed in fear, not knowing what I should do. That's when I heard one of the floorboards creak upstairs. The house was silent, so the simple creak of the old wooden floor was very apparent. My phone was upstairs, so I couldn't call the cops, and with a bunch of snow outside, escape really wasn't an option either. Basically, I said F it and yelled for whoever had broken into my home to come downstairs now. I sat there waiting to hear movement, but nothing. So I yelled out again, more confident that time, probably because I was actually more angry than scared now. Still silent. Then I heard it again, a single creak from the floorboard above me. I said screw it and cut on the stairwell light and just rushed upstairs. My plan was to find whoever had gotten in and to give them a beating of a lifetime. I had a thought on what the intruder could have as a weapon, but it wasn't enough to stop me. There were only 3 rooms upstairs. I went into my office first, which was where the noise sounded like it was coming from. It wasn't anywhere to hide in there except for in the closet, but it was empty. Within seconds, I was across the hall to the guest bedroom, but again, empty. I cut through the bathroom that connected the guest bedroom and my room, pulling back the shower curtain while passing through. Yet still, there was no one there. Now I was back in my room, more confused than ever. The courageousness was wearing off as the uncertainty made it possible for fear to creep back in. I sat and listened for a second. All I could hear was the sound of snowflakes and ice lightly pelting my bedroom windows. I grabbed my weapon out of my nightstand, tossed my cell phone into my pocket, and went to head back downstairs. I planned on making sure no one was in my home just so I could try to rest easy. Only a few minutes had passed from the time I had found my door open to me going upstairs to check where the snowy tracks led. As I stood at the top of the steps looking down into the hall, I noticed something even more terrifying. The track started around the middle of the hall and stopped about halfway up the stairway. This made absolutely no sense. It was as if something had popped up in my hall, walked a few yards, started to go up the stairs, and then disappeared. I walked down the stairs trying to wrap my brain around the situation. After I made sure my home was empty and all the doors locked, I went and cleaned up the water in the hall. I was spooked by this point, thinking about the noises I heard upstairs and the footprints in the hall, and even my side door being wide open. I'm not afraid to say I slept on the couch in my living room that night with all the lights on. I stayed there for another year without any more unexplained events taking place. When I got offered the job I was interested in another city, I was more than happy to move closer instead of making the commute. Hello all, my name is Ellen and I am 65 years old at the time of writing this. My grandson introduced me to the true horror narration genre on YouTube and I've been hooked ever since. I'm excited to share my experience with fellow listeners. 3 years ago, I retired from a 30-year-long career of being a registered nurse. I loved my career deeply and almost everything that came with it, except one thing. Due to our demanding schedule and the type of work we do, we have to go into work no matter what the weather, from hurricanes to blizzards, you name it. I happen to live in Connecticut, where we are known for getting a good bit of snow. This all happened back in 2000, maybe 2001. We were getting a ton of snow that day, and that evening I had to go into work for the late shift. I had a Subaru Forester at the time, which handled the snow pretty well, so I was not too worried. But the back roads I had to drive from my home to get to the highway to get into work were barely touched by the plow trucks, making them slippery and very treacherous. It was dusk and the roads were getting worse by the minute. I had my eyes locked in on the road ahead, just praying and hoping I could make it to the highway, where I knew the roads would be in a little bit better condition. Daylight had faded fast and now only my headlights illuminated the snow-covered road in front of me. It was getting deep enough to where it was hard to make out where that road actually was, blending perfectly with the landscape in one white blanket. As I looked off in the distance, I thought I could see someone standing in the road. Thinking someone had gone off the road into a ditch and needed help, I put my hazards on and began to slow down. The snow was falling pretty hard, but I could still make out a person's silhouette some yards in front of me. As I got closer, the silhouette disappeared within a blink of an eye. I thought that I was going crazy, swearing that I had saw someone, but thought maybe it was just the snow playing tricks on me. When I got to the part of the road where I thought the person would have been standing, I didn't see any tracks or disturbances of any kind in the snow. There was also no other vehicles in sight. Not wanting to come to a complete stop to avoid getting stuck, I picked up a little more speed and carried on with my drive. After a few seconds had passed, something told me to look in my rearview mirror. The shock that I got when I did almost made me swerve off the road. The silhouette that I had saw earlier was back in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes, almost losing control over my vehicle. I turned my head to look back and the person was still there. I could see them better now, but it was still hard to make out prominent features. I figured this person must have needed help, and going against my better judgment, I jumped out of the car and started to hike down the snowy road towards where the person was standing in the middle of the street. The event taking place was already really strange, and to make it even more uncanny, the closer I got to the person, it was still impossible to make out their features. The best way to put it was, they were blurred out in my vision. I thought maybe the heavy snowfall was messing with my vision, so I kept going. The wind had the snow blowing diagonal, causing me to look down at the ground every so often to keep my face from being pelted constantly by snow. When I knew I had to be close, I looked up to spot the person, but there was no one there. I called out that I was there to help, but my ears were only met with the sound of the wind howling and the patter of the snow and ice hitting the ground. I looked down for footprints, but only my tire tracks could be spotted. The super eerie feeling came back, and after standing there for a few more seconds, I turned and made my way back to my car as quickly as I could. I was only on that road for another mile or so before I made it to civilization. I told my coworker what happened later on in my shift, after she asked if I was okay. I guess I had been acting a bit off because the entire time I was working, I was replaying what happened earlier in my mind. She didn't believe me, of course, and that was fine. To be expected even. But I would like to tell everyone listening, if you're driving and you see someone or something in a weird scenario that you just feel isn't right, just keep driving. I'll start this story off by telling everyone reading and or listening to stay away from the dark web. From my first-hand experience, I can tell you all, it is not worth it. I once thought I would dabble in the dark web and do a bit of harmless exploring. I worked for a big tech company and was proficient in all things computers and had been that way since I was a kid. But I never went on the dark web to explore what I had heard so much about. I knew that not everything on there was inherently evil, but you are always a few clicks away from something that is. One snowy evening after I had logged off of work, I used my personal desktop to access the dark web and do a little browsing. I had everything set up from the browser down to all the security needed to perform my exploration. I am also a big gun collector, so that was the first thing I looked up, and I was shocked to see all that I could get delivered directly to my doorstep. I didn't buy anything because all of my weapons I purchased legally, but I just wanted to see if the stories were true. I searched a few more harmless sites and decided it was time to hop offline and make some dinner. I signed out of everything and began to walk out of my room. Right as I got to my bedroom door, I heard the hum of my computer fans kick back on and the lights from my monitors illuminated the room. I turned around confused, knowing that I had just shut down my computer a minute ago. To my horror, my login screen was up. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw someone remotely typing in my password on my computer. I ran over to my desktop and tried to override whatever was happening, but it was no use. My keyboard or mouse no longer had any input to my computer. I held down the main power button, but still nothing happened. The hacker had gotten into my computer, and after only a few seconds started opening files, and within the blink of an eye, the dark web browser was back open. I dropped a F-bomb so loud that I'm sure my neighbors heard it as I went to rip the power cord out of the wall. I knew surely I had been compromised. I grabbed my phone and immediately went into damage control, rushing to change every password I could to all my different emails and banking apps. Anything that I could think of that had shared data with my computer. By then, the panic had fully set in, and I remember sweating, thinking of all the horrible possibilities that awaited me. That's when things took another turn for the worst. My Ring doorbell app popped up on my phone, and a disturbing mutilated voice came through my phone speakers. They referred to me by name, telling me everything that they knew about me, from my address to my closest living relatives. I screamed into my phone to leave me alone. I knew that I was in for a world of trouble and that whoever I was dealing with did this for fun. I called the cops but was basically told there was nothing they could do unless a person was actually at my house. I didn't have any weapons except for an old pocket knife I had bought at a gas station years ago. I sat up half the night, knife in hand, until I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I had several notifications on my phone from unknown numbers and emails. Alongside that, I had a Cash App request for $1,000 from an unknown number. When I opened the text, there was detailed, strict instructions to send the money over to that Cash App request or have hell to pay. They clearly had everything they needed to screw me over. In the message, they stated that if the money was sent over, everything would go back to how it was before. After some long thought, I decided to send the money. I had heard of scams like this, and I was sure whoever was responsible was making thousands of dollars a day off of suckers like me. After I sent the money, I got a simple thank you response through text. Then my phone shut off by itself and rebooted. I immediately wiped my computer and phone while also getting a new Wi-Fi carrier. That was 2 years ago now, and I have not had any trouble since that day. So I'll end this story the way I started it. Stay off the dark web, kids.